I was halfway through my water when Victoria said, "Another table. You're not real family." Laughter clinked like glassware cutting skin. The waiter slid a folder toward me. 3500 stared back, cold and bright. I signed without blinking. My hand shook, my voice didn't. "I'm Julia Thornton. I grew up under the Hayes roof, but never inside their circle. I learned to swallow salt and smile like it didn't burn. Tonight, the burn tasted different. Clean, electric. Across the room, they toasted themselves. Harold told a story. Margaret corrected the punchline. Charles bragged about returns. Victoria watched me, smiling like a judge. I stood, heels counting the distance. I sat alone, near the bar's dim mercy. Silence finally had a witness, me. Before I continue, subscribe and tell me your city. Because this isn't a pity story. It's a reckoning. That night, I stopped being their charity case. I became their consequence. I didn't learn hunger from empty plates. I learned it from empty faces. From being present, yet not included. From standing in photos, cropped later. On Charles's 16th birthday, a car gleamed. Neighbors gathered, cameras flashed, champagne hissed. I walked past in shoes that drank rain. Mine squeaked apologies down the driveway. Victoria unboxed dresses wrapped in tissue. Silk sighed like something alive and chosen. My clothes arrived pre-creased, pre-owned, pre-approved. Closet air smelled like mildew and memory. When I asked about college, silence answered first. Then came the script I knew by heart. Be grateful you even have a roof. Gratitude to them meant permanent compliance. At dinner, I learned table geography. The loud center for the rightful heirs, the edge seats for servants and standbys. I was always near the edge. Harold perfected his benevolent patriarch voice. Margaret handled refinements, rules, reputations again. Victoria sharpened ridicule into something elegant. Charles kept score like a banker. I practiced invisibility until it fit. I could disappear without leaving the room. Teachers said I was resilient and stoic. They never saw the invoice for stoicism. Only Eleanor looked long enough to see. She arrived at my graduation alone, unannounced. She pressed a book into my hands. Her voice cut clean through the noise. You don't need anyone to grant you worth. You'll build it yourself, Julia. That sentence followed me like a lantern. It kept burning when doors shut loudly. It warmed me when winter sat indoors. It stayed lit when microphones lied. The Hayes taught me curated generosity. Gifts with strings, kindness with receipts attached. They fed me, then itemized the portions. They housed me, then taxed my breathing. So I learned another language entirely. The language of keeping ledgers no one sees. Of counting slights, then counting strengths. Of saving evidence and saving myself. Only one woman saw it all. And one signature would change everything. The room went weightless when Eleanor stood. Her cane touched marble like a gavel. I signed a new will yesterday. Everything I own belongs to Julia. Silence swallowed the chandelier's whole. Glasses trembled. A laugh died mid-flight. Harold blinked as if mishearing. Margaret twisted her napkin into rope. Charles recalculated behind his eyes, fast. Victoria smiled without moving her mouth. I didn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The waiter kept breathing for me. He cleared plates like clearing histories. Eleanor rested a hand on mine. Eat, she murmured. You'll need strength. Everyone else tasted metal and dust. By morning, the city had opinions. Headlines didn't need the whole story. Adopted interloper steals Hayes' fortune. Caretaker manipulates a fragile matriarch. Comment sections opened their sharpened mouths. Strangers stapled labels to my name. Photos of me buying milk circulated. Someone circled the milk like evidence. Charles hired a private investigator immediately. Footsteps shadowed me from curb to elevator. A car idled outside my building nightly. Blinds became borders I patrolled hourly. My phone learned new ways to ring. Unknown numbers practiced intimate cruelty. Walk away, Julia, before you're exposed. Exposed for breathing? For existing? For staying? Victoria chose television over text. Under studio lights. Outrage photographs beautifully. She preyed on Eleanor's loneliness, she said. She has always wanted what's ours. The audience hummed with righteous certainty. The host pressed sympathy like a stamp. I watched from my couch, small. I watched, then pressed mute. Eleanor called at dawn, voice gravel soft. Don't let them write your life. Come to the house this afternoon. Her study smelled like paper and rain. Folders lay open like clean wounds. Bank statements. Dated transfers. Authorizations. Numbers that told a different biography. Money set aside after my parents died. Money bled into tuitions and renovations. 600,000 became someone else's childhood. Caldwell, Eleanor's lawyer, spoke without embroidery. They'll manufacture noise. We'll answer with facts. We build a timeline, then a narrative. Truth needs a route to travel. We listed every receipt in silence. We underlined the dates that shattered myths. We flagged the voices that contradicted themselves. At night, I practiced steady breathing. In the mirror, I practiced steady eyes. I wrote my name on sticky notes. I stuck them where panic lived. Door frame, kettle, remote, front pocket. I turned off notifications and turned inward. I archived rumors and kept records. I learned how quiet can sharpen steel. Eleanor's health dipped, then steadied. Her resolve never needed medicine. We go public, she said simply. A press conference, documents, doctors, witnesses. Let the light do its work. I nodded and my fear nodded back. We were done whispering into pillows. We were ready to speak where echoes multiply. But the truth Eleanor showed me would turn their lies to ash. Rain needled the morning like a warning. Caldwell set documents in careful constellations. Dates aligned. Transfers aligned. Motives aligned. Eleanor watched, pale but steady. Stage 4, she told me quietly. Time is short. Truth can't be. Her breath thinned, her will didn't. Today we end the pretending. The press room thrummed like a hive. Cameras blinked, impatient for headlines. Microphones leaned, hungry for casualties. I sat beside Eleanor, spine locked. Caldwell began with a map of money. He walked the room across years, ledger by ledger, transfer by transfer. Numbers testified without trembling. Funds reserved after the Thorntons' accident, he said. For Julia's care, education, future. He turned the page without dramatics. Diverted to Hayes expenses for decades. Boarding school tuition for Charles, highlighted. Renovations for Hayes properties, highlighted. European travel for Victoria, highlighted. A family bill written in my blood. Medical evaluations came next. Quiet weapons. Eleanor competent when signing the will. Cognition tested, documented, witnessed, countersigned. No fog to hide behind. A hand lifted, voice barbed. Ms. Thornton, did you influence Mrs. Hayes? Words that once made me smaller. I looked straight into the lens. I influence nothing except survival. My existence is not coercion. My silence was. Pens paused. Cameras adjusted and held. The back doors crashed open. Victoria arrived. Mascara like war paint. She manipulated an old woman, she cried. She's always wanted what's ours. Microphones swarmed her outrage instantly. The room feasted on performance. I watched the floor's black tile. It reflected us smaller, but truer. Eleanor never rose to chaos. She let it expose itself. When the noise sagged, she murmured, "See, they undo themselves." Caldwell raised one last folder. Affidavits. Bank confirmations. Attorney letters. An arrow through 30 years' fog. Even the cameras seemed to exhale. Outside, the city argued with itself. Gold digger or rightful heir. Threats slid into my voicemail. Walk away before we open everything. But everything was already open. Noise had fewer places left. I slept on Eleanor's couch. She woke at 2, asked tea. "I wish I'd done this earlier," she whispered. "But I'll die without lying." She squeezed my hand, papery warm. "You will live without permission." Morning brought a cease and desist letter. It read like theater, not law. Caldwell smiled without showing teeth. "Good, they're on our stage." We filed the pleadings by noon. Relief felt like a tender bruise. Painful, yet proof of healing begun. Outside, the rain finally unclenched. I stood at the window, counting breaths. Portland steamed under a thinning sky. For the first time, I felt taller. Not bigger, just my full height. We left whispers behind for sunlight. We replaced rumor with receipts. We turned fear into forward motion. Now the truth finally had a road. They called me a thief. Tomorrow, the receipts would name the thieves. The courthouse shone like polished bone. Inside, the air weighed heavy. I wheeled Eleanor to council table. Caldwell stacked binders like quiet fortresses. Across the aisle sat the Hayes. Harold smoothed a cuff, already judging. Margaret clutched pearls into a rosary. Charles watched me, calculating exits. Victoria stared straight ahead, jaw armored. Their attorney rose first, silk smooth. He shaped his voice into a scalpel. "Ms. Thornton manipulated an elderly widow," he began. "Isolation, dependency, sudden change of testament." He walked the jury through insinuations. No facts, just shadows dressed as evidence. Caldwell didn't perform, he began. Bank statements projected onto the wall. Transfers from the Thornton Fund documented. School tuition for Charles. Notarized authorization. Renovation invoices, debits, corresponding dates. 30 years arranged in rows of ink. Money set aside after the accident, he said. For Julia's care and education. Diverted repeatedly to Hayes' expenses. Not gifts, not loans, misappropriation. He called the neurologist next. Crisp testimony about competency and cognition. Eleanor had scored well above thresholds. 2 assessments. 2 dates. 2 witnesses. No fog, no confusion, no coercion. Then the videos came in. The press conference played for the court. Victoria lunged across the screen, shouting, "She's always wanted what's ours. We deserve that money. We raised her." The room didn't move for seconds. Even paper forgot how to rustle. I heard my heart steady, unbelievable. It stayed steady when the clip ended. Caldwell rested a hand on the lectern. "No further questions for that witness," he said. It was my turn to stand. I told the truth without embroidery. The car in the driveway. The dresses wrapped in tissue. The mildew closets. The rain-drinking shoes. The be grateful that replaced permission. How silence became my second language. "I didn't want their money," I said. "I wanted what was meant for me. Dignity. A fair chance. My own name. My existence is not theft. The theft is already in evidence." Their attorney tried one last flourish. "Isn't losing them worth avoiding this spectacle?" "I lost them years ago," I answered. "Today is about not losing myself." Judge Morrison leaned forward, face unwavering. "Having reviewed testimony and documentary evidence," she said, "the court finds the will valid. The estate is awarded to Julia Thornton. Harold and Margaret Hayes will repay misappropriated funds. With interest, the amount totals $1.8 million. This case is closed." Her gavel sounded like weather breaking. Harold collapsed into his chair. Margaret folded inward, pearls rattling softly. Charles stared at numbers he couldn't finesse. Victoria erupted, voice shredding into echoes. The doors devoured her protests whole. I sat and exhaled for years. Eleanor squeezed my fingers, paper strong. "You stood up," she whispered. "You stayed standing." The corridor smelled like varnish and freedom. Outside, light pooled on the steps. I felt taller without moving an inch. Finally, my full height. That day, justice didn't whisper. It roared my name. Eleanor slept more, then deeper. Lavender clung to the curtains like prayer. I read to her softly at dusk. We underlined sentences about chosen family. She smiled without opening her eyes. One night, she did not wake. Her hand cooled in mine, unafraid. Grief moved through me like weather. It did not drown me this time. It washed what needed washing. The papers called me an heir. I corrected them quietly in practice. I wasn't an heir, I was persistent. Persistence had finally outlived their performance. Weeks blurred into signatures and audits. Locks changed. Accounts reconciled. Ledgers closed. The city learned a new headline for me. Not burden, not opportunist, not guest. A woman with a name that stayed. I opened the Eleanor Foundation in spring. Glass, light, and rooms that listened. Kids arrived with eyes that checked exits. We taught them how to stay. We taught them how to leave. We taught them both our victories. Letters found me from everywhere. Foster kids. Adoptees. The quietly estranged. They wrote about shame losing altitude. They wrote about dignity landing safely. I kept every letter in boxes labeled. Proof that silence breaks. Harold and Margaret sold the big house. Charles discovered numbers that refused obedience. Victoria sent an email threaded with apologies. I deleted it before it opened. Closure doesn't always need correspondence. I visited the lake house alone. Wind combed the firs into chorus. On the study desk, her pen waited. I signed nothing. I needed nothing signed. I left a note anyway. Thank you for telling the truth aloud. Walking out, I felt my spine lengthen. Not taller, just undisguised finally. My life no longer needed permission. It needed practice, then joy. If you've been through this, you're not alone. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading. The sweetest revenge isn't ruining them. It's building the life they forbade and living it daily in plain sight.